ahead, call the police.
My son hasn't come back from school yet.
Pardon?
I said I reported my son missing. He hasn't been back from school.
Right.
Well, I haven't seen him since this morning.
Okay, what's your name, please?
Mrs. Ruth and Neave.
Lee?
Neve.
Neve.
N-E-A-V-E.
Okay, and what's your son's name, please?
Rikki. R-I-K-K-I.
Okay. How old is your son?
6.
Okay, and what time was the last time you saw him?
When he went to school.
Was this morning? Okay. What's
This is the curiously calm voice of Ruth Neave, 6-year-old Rikki Neave's mother. Her son did not make it back home after leaving for school, and his lifeless, naked body was found in a bush the following day. Shockingly, the mother was arrested on the charge of killing her own son. Was she a monster that faked concern after committing the heinous crime, or had authorities nabbed the wrong person? Welcome back to Mysterious Hook. I'm Matt, and today we are looking at a 30-year-old cold case finally solved in 2022. If you still haven't subscribed to our channel, please hit the subscribe button and press the notification bell below. Let's dive into the mystery without any further ado. Peterborough is a well-known cathedral city with a Gothic facade, located in Cambridgeshire, England, sitting on the banks of the Neame River. This city has a rich history that goes back to the 13th century. This is where this sad tale took place. Rikki Lee Harvey was born March 4, 1988 in Peterborough, England, to parents Trevor Harvey and Ruth Neave. The couple separated when Rikki was just 3 years old. Trevor had very little involvement in his child's life after the divorce. Ruth went on to marry a man named Dean Neave, who then officially adopted Rikki, thus changing his name to Rikki Neave. However, the marriage was not smooth, and Dean rarely stayed at home. In 1994, 6-year-old Rikki was living with his mother and 2 younger sisters, Rochelle and Sheridan. By many accounts, the home was unfit for young children. Allegedly, Ruth was extremely abusive towards her children, which included physical beatings and starvation. Social services were regular visitors to that home and previously placed Rikki's 8-year-old big sister Rebecca up for adoption. Rikki was also put on the at-risk register, but was, for some reason, allowed to stay with his mother. Ruth herself grew up in an abusive home and then in foster care for most of her childhood. At a very young age, she developed an addiction to drugs which continued on for most of her adult life. Although Ruth blamed Rikki for her husband's absence and punished him harshly on many occasions, Rikki never lost his caring side. He would bathe, feed, and take care of his younger sisters when their mother neglected them. Despite all of the hardships, Rikki was growing up to be a bright, emphatic, and caring person. That is, until his life was tragically cut short at the tender age of 6. On November 28, 1994, around 9:30 a.m., he left his home on the Welland estate in Peterborough and headed for school. He was never seen alive again. When the young boy failed to return home from school that fateful day, Ruth called 999 around 6 p.m. to report her son missing. Sadly, the next day, Rikki's nude body was discovered in a wooded area on the fringe of the estate, just 5 minutes away from his home. It was a place where he often came to play with his friends. His body was posed in the shape of a star. He was laying on his back and his arms were outstretched and his legs were spread wide. The position of his limbs were eerily symmetrical, leading investigators to believe it was some kind of a sacrifice or ritual killing. There was no sign of his clothing, but a single small white shirt button was laying just 18 inches away from his left hand. Ligature marks on the front of his neck were seemingly caused by the zipper on his coat, which indicated that the attack was most likely launched from behind, and the weapon had been his own coat. The post-mortem report of Rikki showed he was indeed strangled to death. November 29, 1994, Rikki's clothes were found in a trash bin 150 yards from the murder scene. There, police would find his school uniform, which included a white shirt, a blue coat, and gray trousers. 3 top buttons from the shirt were missing. His black school shoes were also there with their laces still tied. The mud on his shoes indicated that he had walked into the woods and never came out again. In the right-hand pocket of the jacket were 2 small plastic toys and some cards. With her prolonged history of abuse, Ruth stood out as a prime suspect in her son's murder investigation. Although no physical evidence that connected Ruth to the crime was discovered at the crime scene, authorities found some questionable items in the house. They found several books on the occult, magic, and even devil worship. Additionally, they found a book containing a picture of the famous drawing of Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. Investigators at the time believed that in one of its forms, the posture in the picture resembled the pose in which Rikki's naked body was found. They speculated that Ruth had probably killed her son as a sacrifice to win back her husband. Without any other suspects in sight, in 1995, police arrested Ruth on suspicion of killing her own son. Ruth repeatedly denied the accusations, but nobody paid heed to her words. On January 9, 1995, Ruth was arrested on the charge of killing her own 6-year-old son. Her trial began in October 1996. This case garnered massive attention from the media in the UK. After all, it was a heinous crime allegedly committed by a mother upon her own flesh and blood, the ultimate sin that a mother can commit. Media had already branded her as evil, and it was obvious whom the public considered responsible for the murder, and they were desperate to see her punished. Still, there was no physical evidence that put her at the scene of the crime. Despite this, the prosecution tried to show her as an abusive mother who sacrificed her son to fulfill her sick desires. The defense tried their best to focus on the physical evidence. During the trial, police officer Robert McNeil testified that on the day Rikki was reported missing, he searched the area but did not find Rikki's body. He believed Rikki was killed in another location and later moved to where his body was eventually found. This meant that Ruth would have been with the police when the moving of the body had to have occurred. The judge told the jury that if they believed the officer, they had to believe Ruth was innocent because the timeline did not add up if the 2 theories were combined. After hearing all the evidence, a jury at Northampton Crown Court acquitted Rikki Neave of murdering her son, Rikki. She did, however, plead guilty to child cruelty charges and was sentenced to 7 years of imprisonment. She was released from prison in 2000. From the start, she has always maintained that she was coerced into pleading guilty. Whatever the truth was, as time passed, without any leads to chase, Rikki Neave's murder case would lay dormant for years. After being released from prison, Ruth moved to Cambridgeshire. There, she met a man named Gary Roger, whom she later married. Her 2 younger children were taken from her custody after her conviction and later adopted by 2 separate families. They had little to no contact with Ruth afterward. In 2014, Ruth started campaigning to reopen the case and urged authorities to find her son's killer. Eventually, detectives decided to review the case, which has been regarded as one of the most high-profile cold cases in the UK. Cambridgeshire Police Department was determined to review all the evidence available from the original investigation in the hopes of finding new clues considering new enhanced forensic developments. Detectives found that the trash bin where Rikki's clothes were discovered had never been tested for additional evidence and was not even preserved for later use. However, DNA samples were collected from items of clothing in 1994, but the technology was not sufficiently advanced to provide a DNA match. That DNA was sent to the forensic lab to be reanalyzed using modern techniques. When the results came back, there was a match. They finally had a new suspect, James Watson. The DNA was present in the database because of an arson attack at a British transport police station in 2008. In fact, he was a serial offender who often committed crimes for the thrill of it. Unbelievably, James Watson had been questioned during the initial investigation as a witness after another eyewitness gave information about seeing Watson with Rikki. During questioning, the then 13-year-old Watson stated that on the day that Rikki went missing, he saw Rikki around the middle of the day. He claimed that he had skipped school that day to visit his father, and despite not knowing Rikki, he had a brief exchange with him when little Rikki made the offhanded comment, "That's a big tractor, isn't it?" To which Watson replied, "That's not a tractor, that's a digger." However, he claimed to have never seen the boy again. Notably, in this whole ordeal, he never mentioned having physical contact with the 6-year-old schoolboy on the day of his disappearance. James Watson was born on April 1st, 1981 in Welland Estate, England. Due to his unstable home condition, he was sent to a children's home early on in life. His father, James Watson Sr., was arrested and imprisoned for some unspecified charges. Watson never got along with his father anyway, due to the constant abuse he received from him. He was doing well in the care of his foster mother until she got scared after seeing a shotgun in his hand. Realizing that Watson was too much to handle, she arranged to send him away to Woodgate's Children's Home, just 20 miles from Peterborough. By 1993, the social services regarded him as a vulnerable child. That same year, he was accused of touching a 5-year-old boy inappropriately, but denied the allegations, and no further action was taken. In 1994, 13-year-old Watson was still living in Woodgate Children's Home, near Rikki's house. In the coming years, he would rack up a lengthy list of strange behaviors and run-ins with authorities throughout his childhood and into adulthood. By the age of 13, he fantasized about strangling a kid and even told his mother he had heard a news report on the radio about a boy being found strangled. This was just a few days prior to Rikki's murder. His mother simply said she hadn't heard about it and dismissed the incident. In January 1995, while at the children's home, Watson stole track signal detonators that give off a loud noise and laid them on a railway line. Watson later explained how much fun he had doing it, and he delighted in the notoriety. In August 2005, he stole police uniforms, important police equipment, and car keys from a police station and left them in a car. While asked to explain the reasoning, he said that a majority of his crimes had been to get arrested when his life was not going as planned. Then, 4 years later, in January 2009, Watson again broke into a British transport police station and stole some items. He then set fire to the property store before absconding on a bicycle. Over the years, Watson had been responsible for countless burglaries, theft, and other criminal activities. But the string of offenses doesn't just end with stealing, burglarizing, or even arson attacks. Deep inside, Watson possessed sick sexual desires, which would showcase their symptoms from an early age. Watson's former girlfriend met him when he was just 15. Despite Watson identifying as gay, he formed a relationship with her. She described her horrible experience with him, saying that he used to bring a survival kit, which included a knife, when they went into the woods for sex. She added that towards the end, he would firmly hold her neck and try to choke her during intercourse, leaving marks on her throat. He became more and more forceful as time went on, almost reaching the point of strangulation. The manager of the children's home, where Watson was living between 1994 and 1995, found catalog magazines under his bed that had pictures of babies and toddlers, mostly wearing underwear. He also possessed an unhealthy interest in animals, which often resulted in the death of poor creatures. Despite having such a troublesome past, in all those years, authorities never set their focus on James Watson as a possible suspect for Rikki's murder until DNA evidence pointed to him. When detectives confronted Watson about the DNA on Rikki's clothes, he tried to explain the situation, saying he had picked Rikki up to help him see over a wooden fence at some diggers on a construction site, a detail that he conveniently forgot to mention in his original statement in 1994. However, investigators found that the fence was built years later and had not been there during the time of Rikki Neave's murder, further implicating Watson with his own lies. Although this is the evidence that, along with DNA, ultimately sealed his fate, investigators started putting other pieces together in order to build a strong case. They found that after Rikki's murder, Watson kept newspaper clippings about the case and made numerous copies of them, probably fascinated and excited by his own actions. In April 2016, James Watson was arrested on suspicion of murder. He was later released on police bail and was sent to a bail hostel, which is an approved premises run by probation or volunteer services. He left the UK with a bail hostel companion to escape justice. He first traveled to Rotterdam, then France, and over the Pyrenees to Portugal. During this time, there are multiple pictures of him lounging on the beach, seemingly without a care in the world. From France, he contacted his sister, Claire Perna, who contacted the authorities. Eventually, he was arrested near the British Embassy in Lisbon. His trial began in January 2022 and lasted 11 weeks. During the trial, a heap of evidence was presented to the jury. The DNA evidence, his constant lies, the copied newspaper clippings, mud on the shoe, all pointing towards Watson. It was also argued by the prosecution that undigested food in Rikki's stomach suggested that he had been murdered within 2 hours of leaving home, around the time when the witness had seen Watson with Rikki. Finally, the jury found James Watson guilty on the murder of Rikki Neave, ending a 27-year mystery after 36 hours of deliberation. In late June 2022, he was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 15 years. The sentence reflected the fact that he was only 13 years of age when he committed the heinous crime. Rikki's mom, Ruth, has branded him pure evil, describing how the young boy's murder tore her family apart. Rikki's sister Rochelle said that the verdict was a victory and justice had finally been served after years. She was the one who successfully challenged the decision when prosecutors felt there was insufficient evidence to prosecute. She was part of a victim's right to review to get the decision reversed. Although in the end justice was served, the case is tragic in so many ways. A sweet young boy with a cheeky smile was brutally murdered by another child after suffering years of abuse at the hands of his own mother. The social services failed both boys. Everyone failed them. We can only find solace in the fact that James Watson will no longer be able to hurt anyone else. Let us know in the comment section if you have any insights into this tragic case. Thank you for joining us in today's story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more captivating true crime stories like this. Stay tuned for more episodes. Until the next time, stay safe.